Welcome. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating 1,500-year-old logical puzzle from the Talmud. It starts with what seems like a super simple question about timing, but it just spirals into this brilliant debate. And it gives us this incredible window into how ancient legal minds would tackle these huge paradoxes that could literally unravel entire rituals. At its heart, this is a question we all get. When is the right time to do something? And what happens if you jump the gun? Is being early kind of the same as being on time, or does being premature totally change the game? Well, this very modern feeling problem is exactly what a group of ancient sages were wrestling with. And believe me, their conversation has ripples that go way beyond their specific problem.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off on the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. This is a big day. It's the day of the Passover sacrifice, a really central ritual. But the whole debate starts with a pretty simple question. When, on that day, is the offering actually valid?
So the rules say the prescribed time for the sacrifice is a specific period in the afternoon. It's known as bein harbayim, which literally means between the evenings. And that is the crucial window. The entire debate, everything we're about to get into, hinges on what happens outside of this very specific time frame. And this is where we get our central conflict. On one side, you have the sage Ben Vitera. He argued that, look, the entire day of the 14th is fit for the offering. He saw the afternoon as, the ideal time, but the morning still totally acceptable. But on the other side, Rabbi Yehoshua was much stricter. He said, nope, only the afternoon is valid. If you do it in the morning, you're just too early, and that means it's invalid, period. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that seems like a pretty minor disagreement. But here's where it gets interesting. Another sage, Rabbi Abahu, spots this massive logical problem hiding just under the surface. A problem so big it threatened to make the entire Passover sacrifice completely impossible. Okay, check out this logic. It is devastating. Let's walk through it together. So let's say you take a lamb on the morning of the 14th and you designate it for the Passover sacrifice, right? Now, according to the rule that only the afternoon is valid, that lamb, at that exact moment, is unfit. It's just too early. Here's the kicker. A key principle of sacrificial law is that once an offering is disqualified, even for a split second, it is disqualified forever. So the conclusion is just, whoa. By this logic, every single lamb becomes permanently disqualified on the morning of the 14th, before the right time to offer it has even arrived. And then Rabbi Abahu just throws down the gauntlet with this question. He's basically saying, if my logic holds, how can you ever find a fit offering? He's created a perfect paradox. You can't sacrifice a lamb that hasn't been designated, but the second you do designate it, it becomes invalid. He's shown how one simple rule about timing could make the whole commandment impossible to fulfill. So you're faced with this perfect, seemingly unsolvable paradox. What do you do? Well, the other sages had to find a way out. And this wasn't just some fun academic game. They had to literally rescue the ritual itself. What happened next was this incredible intellectual rescue mission with these brilliant solutions to escape the logical trap. Okay, so the first major breakthrough comes from a sage named Abiye. And what he does is genius. He doesn't argue with Rabbi Abahu's logic. Instead, he challenges one of the basic assumptions about what disqualification even means. He basically suggests we need a whole new way to think about things that are just too early. To solve the whole thing, Abaye introduces this new legal category, Mekasar Zman, which means lacking its proper time. He argues that this is fundamentally different from a permanent disqualification. See, an animal with a blemish, that's a permanent flaw. It's out. But an animal that's just waiting for the right time to show up later on the same day, well, that's not disqualified. It's just on a temporary hold. It's in the waiting room. Now, Abaye's idea is super elegant. But is he just making up a new rule to get out of the jam? Well, another sage, Rav Papa, says absolutely not. And he comes in with this powerful proof by finding a precedent that's already on the books, another law that also happens to be all about timing. Rav Papa points to the rule for consecrating newborn animals. So an animal can't be sacrificed until it's 8 days old. But And this is the key, the law already allowed for that animal to be consecrated for a sacrifice on the night before its 8th day. So at that moment of consecration, it's technically still unfit, it's lacking its time. But because everyone knows it's going to become fit the very next day, the consecration is totally valid. And there it is. This existing case perfectly proves Abaye's principle. It shows the law already gets that there's a difference between being permanently flawed and just being temporarily on hold for time. And just like that, the paradox is solved.
So, woohoo! The Passover lamb is saved. Abaye and Rav Papa figured it out. But in the process of this super specific debate, they stumbled onto something much, much bigger. A deeper set of principles about the very nature of time, validity, and disqualification in law.
And this is where the conversation takes this really fascinating turn. See, the sages aren't happy with just fixing the one problem. They want to understand the universal rule they've just uncovered. When does something become permanently invalid versus just, temporarily on the bench?
So to really sharpen this new principle, Rabbi Yochanan throws a completely different test case into the mix. This one has nothing to do with time, but it has everything to do with that crucial moment of consecration. It involves an animal that's co-owned by two partners.
Okay, here's how this one works. Partner A consecrates his half of the animal. At that very moment, the animal becomes partially holy, but it's totally invalid as an offering. I mean, you can't sacrifice half an animal, right? Then he goes and buys the other half from his partner and consecrates that too. So now the animal is 100% holy, but it's too late. It is permanently disqualified. Why? Because at its very first moment of holiness, it was already in a broken, invalid state. And that's the difference. The lamb was just waiting for the right time on the right day. This animal had a fundamental flaw from the absolute outset.
So what's the point of all this back and forth? Well, this intricate debate wasn't just mental gymnastics. This was the actual process these sages used to forge clear, foundational rules of law, rules that could be applied across tons of different situations.
And from this one single debate about a lamb being too early, they forged 3 powerful and lasting legal principles.
So here they are. First, once a consecrated animal becomes unfit, it's disqualified forever. Second, and this is the big one we got from the co-owned animal case, if an offering is already invalid at the very moment it's consecrated, that disqualification is permanent. That's different from just being early. And third, these rules are so strong that they apply even if the animal's holiness is just about its monetary value, not even its use as a sacrifice. And this kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? We just watched these ancient minds take a really small problem about a lamb and use it to build these universal legal principles about time and validity. It really makes you wonder how many of the legal concepts we just take for granted today, in contracts and property law, whatever, have their secret origins in solving ancient, very specific, and seemingly obscure puzzles just like this one.